Hello, this is Daniel Mart back again. For those who don't know me, I am an actor and filmmaker based out of South Florida. And for this week, I kind of just want to discuss my top 20-ish favorite episodes from Avatar: The Last Airbender. So this Thursday, the day I post this, the live-action Netflix version of Avatar is going to be releasing. I believe it's like 10 episodes long, something like that. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 episodes long, something like that. I'm anxiously happy, I guess is the best way to word it, to see this new show. Cautiously optimistic, that's another way to describe it. Because honestly, Avatar is one of my favorite shows of all time. And it's just one that I hold dear to my heart a lot. And with some of the behind-the-scenes drama that's happened in regards to this show, such as the original people who made the show dropping out, from this live-action show, for the fact that this show has been in development for the past 5 years. Some of the recent news and leaks and whatever that's been going on recently, there's a lot of trepidation or whatever that is with the show. So that's why I'm saying I'm cautiously optimistic. But still, I want to celebrate it. And for that, I'm going to give you my top 20-ish favorite episodes of the series. And I say 20-ish because there's a lot of times in this series where you'll have a part 1 and part 2, or in the case of the finale, it's a 4-part finale. And it's one of those things that, yes, I could just do, let's say Boiling Rock. Maybe I can only do Boiling Rock part 1 or Boiling Rock part 2, for example. But, realistically, the episode, you need to have them both combined together for it to feel like the whole experience. And that's the case here. I have a lot of them where it's really 2 episodes combined into one, because, again, part 1, part 2. So that's why I say kind of 20-ish episodes, or, again, in the case of the finale, it's all 4 episodes combined into one. Let's get onto the list, starting with number 20. So at number 20, we have Season 3, Episode 6, The Avatar and the Fire Lord. And honestly, this is one that I wasn't sure if I was going to have on the list because it was so close with some of the other honorable mentions I'm going to say at the end of the video, like I always do. I think at the end, this is the one that just won out because it gave us more development on Roku himself. Roku, and as with literally any avatar in the series, aside from Aang and Korra, Roku is just one of those avatars that everybody always wants to know more about. And so, especially so early on in the franchise, having an episode like this where we actually get to see his development as an avatar is very interesting, especially because of how it connects with Zuko's story, how it connects with Aang's story, and the fact that he is basically the best friend of Sozin, who started the 100-Year War, which led us into this whole shit show, which we haven't shown. So honestly, I think it is a very underrated episode, and admittedly so, because I almost didn't even put it on the list because of some of the other honorable mentions I have here. Again, it just kind of won out at the end because of the fact that you do get that backstory with Sozin and with Roku and how that relates to the current story. And honestly, the ending of the episode where Iroh is talking to Zuko in his jail cell, and he's saying, and how he's saying that you need to understand the conflict between both of your great-grandfathers to understand the conflict that's going on within you right now. Honestly, it's just great. It's spectacular. It's great, amazing, and honestly, the cinematography, I guess that would be the word. It's weird using the word cinematography for an animated film or show, but honestly, I guess the imagery, where yes, Iroh is the one in jail, but you have the bars covering Zuko, is honestly masterful. Honestly masterful. So next up, I have The Tales of Ba Sing Se, Season 2, Episode 15. And I'm not gonna lie. I actually thought I would have this episode a lot higher on the list. And I think part of it has to do with the fact that Iroh's story is just so heartbreaking. And I guess rightfully so. I mean, part of the reason it's also heartbreaking is because it is dedicated to Mako, which was the original voice actor for Iroh, who died shortly after, I think, Season 2 wrapped up. If I'm not mistaken, or maybe right before it, but still. So that segment of the episode is just dedicated to Iroh himself. You also do have the Momo story, which I think is also kind of heartbreaking because he is trying to find Appa. So kind of a shout out to Appa's last days in that regard, which, yeah, but again, I legitimately thought I was going to have this one higher, but if I'm being honest, some of the other vignettes, although they are fun, like the one with Aang trying to basically start a zoo outside of the walls, or Sokka having a poetry slam, even Katara and Toph's story, where although that one does kind of hit hard at times, it's not, at the end of the day, it's not that much of a standout. I think, let's be honest, this episode, we all just think of it because of Iroh. We don't really think of some of the other vignettes, the other short stories, whatever. And although it's not the right thing to do per se, it's really the reason why this episode is remembered. That being said, again, the other vignettes, they're good. They're just, they don't compare to Iroh's story because, goddamn, obviously, you know. Next up, the Ember Island Players Season 3, Episode 17. Recap episodes in general are very hard to do. Even Korra, when Korra did their recap episode, it honestly paled in comparison to this one. I'll be honest, I'm not the biggest anime fan, so I've seen some animes, but it's always the recap episodes that tend to be, I guess, skipped or not as noticed as always. And Avatar as a whole, despite it being, you know, Western animation, it is heavily inspired by anime. So it's one of those things, eventually they were going to have a recap episode. And honestly, the way they had the recap episode was honestly fun. That's what I could do, best way I could describe this episode. It's very, very fun and almost in an absurdist way, if I'm being honest, because you're seeing this play based off the past 3 seasons of what's going on, but then I don't know if tragic would be the right word, out of nowhere for sure, but like, of course, because this takes place within the Fire Nation, Team Avatar is going to lose within this fictional play that the Ember Island players have portrayed. And it's very funny. It's kind of sudden, too, because you don't expect this. Because throughout this whole episode, they're kind of breaking the fourth wall, hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And at the end, oh, Aang could actually die. And you kind of remember those stakes, again, are there in this. And this is probably the last episode you would have really expected for those stakes to be brought up. But at the same time, it's a few episodes right before the whole series finale, so might as well bring them back here. Next up, I have Jet, Season 1, Episode 10. And this is one that I'm kind of surprised it's this high on the list, if I'm being honest, even though it's like number 17. This is one because for me, it's one that I don't really think about that often, if I'm being completely honest. I honestly prefer Jet's appearances in Season 2, if I'm being honest, but part of the reason why I like it in Season 2 is because of what they did here in this episode. Season 1 sometimes has this thing where they want to show how dark this world is, so to speak, but they also want to have fun with stuff like the fortune teller, for example, or even the Great Divide, if I'm being honest, which, by the way, I think the Great Divide gets like overhated, but that's just me. And then you have episodes like Jet, for example, or The Storm, which we'll get to later, where like, oh shit, this world is like a lot darker because of what the themes they're trying to portray. And, you know, having these orphans kids because of the Fire Nation, because of the war and destruction they've caused. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense why these people will be vengeful. And again, the fact that Jet kind of just wants to exterminate a whole town of innocent Fire Nation citizens. Yeah, well, I mean, it's dark, but in a sense, it's the price of war. And is he doing what he's trying to do? Is it right or wrong? That's honestly a real moral conundrum. And it's one of those things I don't really know how I would answer that. And the way they kind of solved that in the show makes sense. Yeah, it's one of those things. I don't know if Jet's plan is, I mean, morally it's wrong, but given the situation, you kind of do understand where he's coming from. If I'm being honest, you do understand where he's coming from. So it's one of those things that, again, I didn't realize I was going to have it this high. Again, 17, still not high, but not that high compared to everything else. Honestly, yeah, I'm surprised. And again, it does a lot of heavy lifting for Jet's future appearances on the show. So also get a shout out for that. The Blind Bandit, Season 2, Episode 6, the introduction of Toof. Honestly, one of the best earthbenders in the series, in the franchise. One of the best, just overall, benders in the franchise. I mean, here, she created a whole sub-bending category with metal bending. Granted, none in this episode, and future episode, but still, like, that's how amazing of a character Toof is. And if you remember behind the scenes, originally Toof was not supposed to be the Toof we know, this blind little girl. No, originally she was supposed to be some big buff guy like we saw in the Ember Island Players. And actually his original design, I believe, was also eventually used for Roku's earthbending teacher that we saw in The Avatar and the Fire Lord. Sud, I believe is his name. Sod, something like that. I mean, honestly, this is maybe one of the best introductions to a character in this series. I mean, of course, Aang gets probably the best introduction. Same thing with Zuko. But like, honestly, Toph does get one of the better introductions in the series for just like a character that kind kind of becomes big out of nowhere. I mean, yes, she was seen in the swamp through like visions for like a couple seconds, but we didn't know who the fuck that was. It wasn't until now that we realized, oh, that's who that was. And honestly, who she becomes throughout the series is just amazing. But again, that introduction in this episode makes it great because she comes from this rich family who doesn't understand her and then is always trying to limit her, and she just wants freedom. And then even to a lesser extent, you do have stuff like the Boulder and the Hippo who would eventually come back in Day of Black Sun. And, those are some great reappearances later down the series. So, you have that too. I mean, overall, just one of the best introductions to a character in the series. Next up, we have the Southern Air Temple, Season 1, Episode 3. So just like I was talking about with Jet, how Season 1 has kind of this weird issue where sometimes they want to go light, sometimes they want to go dark. Well, good thing they went dark right off the bat. Look, that's not to say that the first 2 episodes of the series aren't dark, but they're not light per se either. They're like in that good middle ground. This, however, gives us that definitive beginner's dark energy, so to speak, that we need. Because, I mean, like, right off the bat, we get genocide. We get the genocide of an entire nation, civilization. This is also the first time we ever see Aang go into the Avatar state. I mean, yes, we see him in the Avatar state because he's the boy in the iceberg, so obviously. But, like, realistically, this is the first time we see him go in that Avatar state. And this is before he's mastered any of the other elements. So, in that alone, he's already kind of like, holy shit, that's scary as fuck. Again, just that power that we see of him right now, with him only mastering one element, you can just imagine how he's going to be towards the end of the series once he's mastered all 4 elements, which we do. And again, we get this introduction to what this world really is, with the genocide of an entire nation, and how that affects everybody, not just Aang, how that affects Katara and Sokka, and how ultimately that affects the world. And especially when the Avatar state, I guess, triggers all the other Avatar temples across the world. Is that what you call it? I guess. I mean, like, because to a certain extent, you want Aang's existence, reappearance to be secretive, but like after this, no, there's no way that's gonna be secretive anymore. Yes, by this point, Zuko, Iroh already knows. Same thing with Zhao. He knows by this point, but now the whole world knows, and it's like, well, yep, he's fucked in more ways than one. He really better watch his back. So. Again, the introduction to that dark that we really needed at the best moments ever, and in the best way ever. Next up, we have The Day of Black Sun, Season 3, Episodes 10 and 11. So, like I said, we are going to have a few 2-parters, or in the case of the finale, a 4-part episode combined into one. But yeah, this is the first one I have here, and I mean, here's the thing. To a certain extent, we've thought that the whole culmination of the series is going to lead up to this, and then it just doesn't. It really doesn't. And kind of that expectation to be subverted in that way, in a weird way, it's exciting, but it's also tragic, because like, you were so close to victory. We tasted victory, like Hakora said, we tasted victory, and that's all that matters. We've never been this close, but we tasted victory, and that's all that matters. In a very bittersweet way, it's like, yeah, I guess that is all that matters. And, of course, they'll get a second chance to do this all over again. But, being so close to victory and then just failing at the end because of exterior circumstances, so to speak, it's heartbreaking. But even then, all the battle scenes are great. The return of a lot of the characters that we've seen throughout the series, like the Boulder and the Hippo, the Swamp Benders, Haru, the machinist, however you pronounce that word, the engineer, the engineer from the Air Temple, and his son, Haru, and his father. I'm pretty sure I said Haru. Like having Batu of the Water Tribe, having all these characters that we've seen just throughout the series. Again, some of the freedom fighters, and then just seeing them battle alongside alongside the gang is amazing. I kind of wish they would have had some of the Kyoshi warriors there, but circumstances because of previous episodes. Just honestly, a few like random little characters I kind of wish they would have had there. Again, the Kyoshi warriors, I think, are the big ones. Maybe some of the other wrestlers that aside from the Hippo and Boulder that were there. At the end of the day, it's just semantics. Overall, it's just great. It's almost like the Avengers style version of for the series to a certain extent. But again, it's a very heartbreaking, bittersweet win/lose at the end. Next up, Lake Laogai, Season 2, Episode 17, There Is No War in Ba Sing Se. I mean, yeah, look, I'm not gonna lie. These 4 block of episodes between between City of Walls and Secrets to about Lake Laogai are honestly some of my favorite stretches of episodes. I know Appa's Last Day is like an honorable mention. I already know I said Tales of Ba Sing Se, and you'll see City of Walls and Secrets later down this list. But honestly, Lake Laogai is, I don't want to say it's the scariest, because there are some scarier episodes in this series, but it's honestly the most, up until this point in the series, it probably would be one of the scariest episodes in the entire series, up until this point. In a sense, it's such a mindfuck of an episode, because you basically have a political thriller for like these 4 stretches of episodes, and it basically culminates in this, Lake Laogai, where they're trying to basically usurp the minister's power. I forget his name right now, but the minister's power, and they practically lose. I mean, Jet literally dies in this episode. And yes, it's made kind of ambiguous because this aired to Nickelodeon, they couldn't really show death, even though, let's be honest, just a bunch of benders that probably have just died by being crushed by a rock wall or being thrown off a cliff or some shit like that, or literally burned to death. Besides the point. Or even Bloodbent, which we're not gonna get into yet. Jet is probably the most obvious person who's died, aside from like the actual avatars, for example, or Kaya, which is the mother of Saka and Taro. So like up until this point, we haven't really seen death, and just seeing Jet die, you know, this reformed character from what happened in the episode called Jet to now, seeing how he's been reformed, you know, overcoming being brainwashed as well. It's just like, holy fuck. And honestly, it's a death that actually like legitimately hits. But even that aside, overall it's just a great episode. Again, them trying to investigate what's going on, them trying to find Appa, them trying to like just figure out what the fuck is going on in the city of Walls and Secrets. But again, yeah, them trying to figure out what the fuck is going on. It's very thrilling, and it's a great combination to this like little mini story. Speaking of City of Walls and Secrets, Season 2, Episode 14, City of Walls and Secrets. I just talked about how this little story arc ended. Let's talk about how it began. Because in between these episodes, we have Ba Sing Se, Tales of Ba Sing Se, we have Apple's Last Days. So we already know how it ended. We already know what's some in the middle. Now we have the beginning. And honestly, this is, again, for me, this is personally one of the scarier episodes in the series. It's not the scariest. We all know which one that one is. Well, for me, in a weird way, this is probably the scariest episode in the series, because you do have that political element of it, where it's like a political thriller where you have, you know, corruption going on. You have these, you know, the minister, you know, switching out Judies in and out because the original Judy isn't doing their job properly. You know, the whole gang trying to talk to the king, to the Earth King, and them being shunned out in every possible way. You know, them trying to infiltrate the palace to talk to the Earth King, and then again just failing, and then getting that threat at the end of, you know, you could stay here, you know, but you have to behave. If not, who knows where Appa is gonna be? And it's just like, goddamn. And again, it's the beginning of such a great mini story arc within the whole series. And personally, for me, it is one of the more personally scary episodes, because again, just all that corruption, all that political intrigue, which again, by the way, it's not something you really expect in a show like this. You know, for Nickelodeon in like, what, 2005, give or take. You don't expect this. You don't expect this to be on Nickelodeon for kids, but hey, it is. And it's very surprising, very surprising. And it's one of the episodes that proves that this show isn't just for kids, it's for adults. Next up, we have another 2-parter, Boiling Rock, Season 3, Episodes 14 and 15. So, yeah, this is basically a prison break. I mean, you have Hakora. He's been arrested because of what happened in the Day of Black Sun. You know, he was pointed out as the leader of that whole rebellion, that group of soldiers. So, of course, he gets sent to the most maximum prison that the Fire Nation has. And, of course, Sokka wants to try to rescue him because, you know, father-son. And honestly, like, here's the thing. This is one of those episodes that honestly does prove why Sokka is such a genius character. Because, like, usually he says in this episode, usually I go in there with a plan, and sometimes the plan fails, sometimes it succeeds, but I still figure it out. Here, I'm just playing it by ear. And honestly, it still kind of works. Like, regardless, his plan still kind of works, as bullshit as it is sometimes. It honestly does work. And also, you get the reintroduction of Suki, who hasn't been seen since, like, Season 2. In Apple's Last Days, if I'm not mistaken. You have Sokka and Zuko finally trusting each other. You have, you have this other prisoner, Cheat Lane, something like that, randomly like introduced there because fuck it, why not? And not gonna lie, I kind of wish they would have kept his character around just a little bit more, or like shown him at the finale of the episode of the series. I mean, honestly, just having this whole prison escape throughout these 2 episodes is just great. And even then, you also have the betrayal of May and Ty Lee against Azula, because that's a betrayal. I guess you don't expect. I didn't expect it the first time I see it, and I'll be honest. To a certain extent, even though I know it's coming, there is a part of me that still doesn't expect it, or is still surprised by it. More so Ty Lee's part of it, because it's just so sudden. Like May, you could kind of understand why she would rebel against Azula, but Ty, I'm not gonna say it's random, but it's very unexpected at times. But once you realize the relationship that Ty Lee has with May, it makes sense. This is also where Azula really starts breaking down, because this is the betrayal of her friends. Like she could handle her brother being a dipshit betrayer, traitor, whatever. But I don't think she can handle her friends doing that to her. And clearly she can't, and she spirals throughout the rest of the season and series. I mean, honestly, just great seeds to sprinkle in right before the series ends. Next up, we have the Southern Raiders, Season 3, Episode 16. Zuko and Sokka teaming up to do something? Great. Zuko and Katara teaming up to do something? Holy fuck. Because here's the thing. Katara, for very obvious reasons, throughout the whole series, has been seen as the mother of the group. So it's kind of scary when Mama Bear is going out for revenge. Because we've never really seen her be this angry, this vengeful. You know, the closest I could think of is her being maybe kind of petty towards Zuko when he first joined. Rightfully so, because of what he did. But this is her going full vengeful. And it's one of those things that it even scares Zuko. It even scares Zuko, especially because, first off, I'm pretty sure he didn't even know about the existence of bloodbending. So, one, holy shit, bloodbending is a thing. And two, holy fuck, Katara is using bloodbending. Like, that really gave him some pause. Like, that really, like, even through the animated eyes, you could tell, like, that gave him some pause. It's one of those things that's honestly kind of tragic that she's gone through such a dark place that she has to use bloodbending again. Because that's one of those things that she doesn't want to use. She outlaws it by the time that Legend of Korra is a thing. That's been completely outlawed because of Katara. And even when she learned bloodbending, she was crying at the end of that episode. So it really shows how much this is affecting her. How her not letting go of the pain, so to speak, has really affected her to the fact that she will use the one thing that she refuses to ever use ever again, bloodbending. You know, even her saying to Yang Rong, I'm saying that, you know, she feels nothing for him at the end. She hates him, but she also feels nothing for him. And she understands why he can do what he does. You know, it's poetic, I guess, in a sense. Again, bittersweet. It's very bittersweet. But the fact that she is able to forgive Zuko for all his previous actions, I think makes that bittersweet part a bit sweeter. But then Zuko hits it back to Aang's like, okay, I understand you're a pacifist, but what the fuck are you going to do with my dad? And again, that hits it right back to, shit, yeah, what am I going to do with the dad? with the Fire Lord, or the Phoenix King, as he goes by at the end of the series. I do think it is one of the more sadder episodes in a sense, because of the fact that Katara has to bloodbend at the end. I do think, and because of that, it is one of the more sadder episodes, even though most people probably wouldn't associate that with this episode, that word sad with this episode. But for me, I do think in a lot of ways, it is one of the sadder episodes in the series because of that reason. And also because, it is one of the best because of that same reason as well. Next up, the Crossroads of Destiny, Season 2, Episode 20. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of struggled putting this one on the list. Like here, I knew it was gonna be on the list. Don't get me wrong. I just didn't know where on the list I should place it, if I'm being honest. And here at number 9, it just makes sense. It makes sense. Because here's the thing. This is an episode I actually don't really go back to that often, if I'm being completely honest. And I can't really tell you why, one reason or another, why I don't really tend to go back to this episode that often. But I just don't. I don't really know what to tell you about that. I just don't. That being said, it has some great moments. Of course, the fight scene at the end between Zuko and Azula versus Aang and Katara and Iroh, kind of. And I guess the Ty Lee are thrown in there as well. It's amazing, you know, the conversations that Zuko has with Katara, the conversation that Iroh has with Aang. Those are all amazing. And of course, just Azula literally zapping Aang during the Avatar stage. It's just like one of the most holy fuck moments in the series. So, like, again, it has a lot of great moments. Overall, though, it's still a great episode. Everything that's been leading up into Season 2 does lead up to this. Because, again, it's one of those things. It's one of those moments where you think Aang is finally going to get a win, and then the rug gets pulled out for him, or in this case, gets shocked away from him, and to such a tragic degree that you legitimately think that he's going to die. Like, you almost don't know how there's going to be a Season 3, you know? Next up, we have Saka Master, Season 3, Episode 4. Not gonna lie, this is one of those episodes where I actually thought I was going to have it a little bit higher, But it's also one of those things, like, once we get to, like, some of these next episodes, it makes sense why this one is at number 8, if I'm being honest, because some of these other episodes are just, I like them better. They're more impactful for me, whatever. And here with Saka's Master, it's one of those things that you don't really think about that often, in the sense that, yeah, I mean, yes, you know, Saka is the only non-bender in the group, but you'd never really stop to think why or how that affects him. And, like, yes, we've gotten hints throughout the series of how that could possibly affect him, but I think this is the episode that really puts that in the forefront, puts his feelings in the forefront of, like, hey, this is how I legitimately feel about being the only non-bender in the group. And this is, again, keep in mind, this is before Suki joined the group too. And just to have someone who actually believes in Saka, that he is a master in his own right, is honestly amazing. More so because, again, Piandao is actually Fire Nation. He trained Zuko as well to be a sword wielding master. You know, so when that, I mean, granted, that revelation is always there, but the other revelation, or the reveal, so to speak, of Sokka saying, hey, I'm actually Water Tribe, and then Piantao, yes, they do have their fight, but again, that was just another test for Sokka at the end of the day. But for Piantao to say at the end, like, hey, it doesn't matter what nation you're from, I'm just trying to train the next master. I don't give a fuck. You know, that's why I don't believe in some of the Fire Nation ideology. It's amazing. And it also helps Sokka become a member. Would that be the right way to word it? But yeah, become a member of the White Lotus, because he does get the chip at the end. Let's be honest, between the end of this series and basically Legend of Korra, he has become a White Lotus. I'd be shocked if they don't ever make that part canon, that he was a White Lotus at one point. This was a sort of him becoming a White Lotus, for damn sure. Again, having somebody believe in Sokka in that way, and that's not to say that Aang or Toph or Katara, they never believed in him, but it's one of those things like, oh, a non-bender believes in a non-bender, I think makes him way more impactful than a bender believing in a non-bender. Sokka's great. Sokka's great, so he needs a win, and he gets a space sword, a really great space sword at the end, which is great. Next up, we have The Storm, Season 1, Episode 12. And in a lot of ways, I almost want to say that the Avatar and the Fire Lord was maybe inspired by this episode, and just their story structure and just the general formula of the story, in the sense that you're learning more about the previous Avatar, Roku, and his relations to both the Avatar and Zuko. In a lot of ways, I almost feel the same way about that with The Storm. Yes, granted, we are learning more about Roku and how he relates to Aang, but at the same time, we're now learning about Zuko and his backstory, and how he got the scar through an Agni Kai versus his father, because he supposedly spoke out of line during a war general meeting. You know, I think getting that backstory from Zuko, because up until this point, I want to say up until this point, he's mostly just been the bad guy, but we don't know why he's a bad guy. So to have the two backstories of both the Avatar and Zuko, of Aang and Zuko, being brought into the forefront at this point in the show. That's, again, not to say that they haven't been brought to the forefront in previous episodes, but I think this makes it the most clear-cut way of their backstories, and how it actually influences both of them up until this day in the timeline. Again, just amazing storytelling overall, all around. Just great. Next up, number 6, The Puppet Master, Season 3, Episode 8. Quite literally the darkest episode the series has ever made. Here's the thing. Plant bending, yes, that's a thing. But I don't think anybody really thought about that in terms of blood bending. Like, yeah, you could control plants, but what if you could control people? I don't think, not that I recall. Granted, when this show came out, I was like 8. So it's not like I was following Avatar on the daily. I'm sure nobody really thought about that in terms of blood bending until it was actually a thing. And then, like, oh fuck, you know, like, oh fuck, bloodbending is a thing. But the other thing with that is just getting the backstory to the whole Water Tribe, or the Southern Water Tribe, through Hama is, again, I mean, I want to say it's dark, bittersweet, whatever word you want to use, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's just dark. And then just even how Hama was managed to even figure out bloodbending, you know, how to even do that, and how she practically trained herself to do that so she can escape jail and live in anonymity, so to speak. It's frightening. I don't know if that would be the right word. I mean, well, frightening if you're a Fire Nation citizen, because she's gonna bloodbend the shit out of you. But even for her, like, you kind of understand why she did what she did, if I'm being honest. You kind of understand why she did what she did. And, you know, the fact that she practically forced Katara to learn bloodbending is, again, I do think is one of the more tragic scenes in the series. And this kind of led to a fan theory later on that this is why Kaya, Katara's mother, was killed, because they believed that she would be a bloodbender. That's why they weren't taking prisoners. That's why Yanrong didn't take in prisoners, because they thought that the last waterbender down there would be a bloodbender because of what happened with Hama, which kind of makes sense. And it makes it even dark. It gives even some more dark overtones that you don't really expect for it to be there. Definitely one of the scariest episodes Nickelodeon has ever made, period. And definitely one of the scariest episodes in this series, for damn sure. Next up, Zuko Alone, Season 2, Episode 7. Now, kind of a weird detail, but I think just for episode titles alone, this may be my favorite episode title, arguably. I don't know, I think the Puppet Master is actually pretty up there. Dale Blackson has a pretty cool title, you know. The Boy in the Iceberg has a pretty cool title, but I think for me, just personally, Zuko Alone, for actual episode titles, may actually be my personal favorite one. And overall, this is in the top 5. This is in the top 5, obviously. They brought basically the Western genre into Avatar. I mean, what else do I need to say? And it's one of those things that you want a win for Zuko, because right now, like the episode says, Zuko alone, you know? So you want him to get a win. He's trying to connect to these earthbending citizens, and again, they don't know that he's a Fire Nation. They don't know he's a firebender, let alone that he's the crown prince of the Fire Nation, until that information is revealed. And then once that information is revealed, and the rejection that Zuko gets out of it, it's very heartbreaking, very tragic, because you have this guy who is clearly trying to form a connection to anybody who would trust him. We see this even before this episode, we see this after this episode. He is always trying to form a connection no matter what. And this is the first time that connection is actually reciprocated, I would say, or one of the first times where it's actually reciprocated. And then at the end, it gets taken away from him because he needs to defend himself. And it's very, very tragic. Overall, though, still one of the better episodes, one of my favorite episodes, and honestly, my favorite Zuko episode. Next up, we have The Beach, Season 3, Episode 5. And okay, granted, I just said that Zuko Alone is my favorite Zuko episode, but this one could give it a running. I mean, granted, it is one place ahead of it, so take that for what you will. But the thing is, I don't really see this as a sole Zuko episode. I see it more as I don't know, Zuko team episode? What would you call them? I guess Team Avatar, so I guess Team Zuko, Team Firebenders? They're not all Firebenders. Only 2 of them. The other one's a cheap blocker, and the other one is just really good with throwing knives. So yeah, here's the thing: similar to the recap episode, there always seems to be a beach episode in animes. You know, again, from what I understand, I haven't seen that many animes, but from what I understand, there's always that one beach episode, and usually those beach episodes are just there for shits and giggles. However, in this episode, The Beach, they actually did something with this where, yes, we see an exploration as to why Zuko is the way he is, but we also get an exploration as to why Azula is the way she is, and May, and Ty Lee. We get an exploration as to why all these characters are the way they are. And honestly, it makes sense. These are like royal children. These are, you know, your most high-end, affluent royal children. There's a reason why they all behave the way they behave. And that scene at the campfire, and not just for Zuko, because I think Zuko, of course, is a standout, but even for May, even for Ty Lee, even for Azula, it's very telling for each of them. You know, Azula saying that her mom viewed her as a monster, and she was right, you know, and she laughs about it, but it's like, goddamn. You know, Ty Lee talked about how she's one of like 7 children who all look the same, and she's always trying to be different despite being part of a set, so to speak, which kind of makes it weird why she ends up joining the Kyoshi Warriors, but besides the point. Or even Mei Lee, how is Mei Lee? May? Yeah, Ty Lee and May. Yeah, or even how May, I wouldn't say rejected by her parents is the best way to word it, but like how she doesn't really get that affection from her parents, unlike how her brother does, who's like 5 years old anyways. You know, but her basically saying, yeah, I get everything I want and I'm still not happy. It's weird and morose and tragic, and all in one. And then, again, all of them venting. And I think it's the first time in the series where I feel like Azula and Zuko are actually siblings, because they're actually talking with each other. You know, yes, they're still bickering and whatever have you, but I feel like first time, only time, I don't know, you tell me, but I feel like it may be the only time where they actually feel like a family in a sense. And, you know, that brings its own tragic air subtext to it as well. A fantastic, fantastic episode. All right, at number 3, we have the four-parter, the finale, Sozin's Comet. Season 3, episodes 18 through 21. Here's the thing. This is the finale. What do you want me to say? What do you want me to say? Okay, like, the only actual nitpick I have is the fact that, Aang learning spirit bending to take away the Fire Lord's bending is kind of a Deus Ex Machina moment, especially him hitting the rock in his back at just the perfect place where his tree could be unlocked, and him doing that, I think we all know that's a God of the Machines, that's a Deus Ex Machina moment. But even then, I think that's a Deus Ex Machina moment done well. Done great, in my opinion. But here, everything else in these 4 episodes is just mind-blowing. Aang talking to his past lives, to Roku, to Karuk, to Kyoshi, to Yangshen, talking to some of his past lives is just amazing, and the advice that they give him is amazing. And if you really pay attention to what they're saying, yes, he's asking if he should kill the Fire Lord. They're not saying yes. If you really pay attention to what they're saying, they're not saying yes, but they're also not saying no. At the end of the day, all 4 of them essentially say that you should do whatever feels right to you. However you want to figure that out, that's up to you, but it should be what feels right to you. And yes, some like Kyoshi, for example, especially Kyoshi, they're like, yeah, I mean, murder is murder, so what? Which, for Kyoshi makes sense. But like even her advice comes down to you should do what feels right to you at the very end. But even that, besides that, you also have the fact that Zuko, I mean, the Agni Kai between Zuko and Azula is honestly one of the best parts of animation that this series has to offer. Scenes in animation, and even then later on when it's Katara versus Azula, which I'm pretty sure Azula did not expect Katara to fucking pull up one on her like the way she did with the whole waterbending ice shit that she pulled. And I'll be honest, even Azula like just kind of wailing there, crying, breathing fire like a dragon at the end. It is very tragic because it's like, yeah, this is the downfall of Azula, like to the nth degree. Like that's the other thing. Azula progressively getting worse and worse and worse and worse, mentally speaking, throughout every single episode. Ever since Boiling Rock. I mean, like, you see what it culminates to at the very end of this. Of course, Sokka and Toph and Suki battling it out on the air blimps that the Fire Lord owns and all that. That whole battle is great. You have those moments where you actually thought that Sokka or Toph or Suki were gonna die, and then they don't. It's just great. You have a bunch of great moments. Of course, the fight between the Fire Lord and Aang, it's amazing, despite the whole Deus Ex Machina moment at the end. Overall, it's just great, and it culminates to Zuko becoming the Fire Lord and Aang becoming his trusted advisor up until this point, and everyone lives a happy ending. I guess that's it. At number 2, we have another 2-episode two-parter, and that is The Boy in the Iceberg and The Avatar Returns, Season 1, Episodes 1 and 2. So, yeah, this is probably the only one where it's not, like, for example, like The Boiling Rock or Sozin's Comet, where it's not, Boiling Rock Part 1, Boiling Rock Part 2. No, this is The Boy in the Iceberg and The Avatar Returns. And the reason I decided to put these two in one is because that's basically how I've always viewed them. I can't watch The Boy in the Iceberg without ever watching The Avatar Returns. Vice versa, I can't watch The Avatar Returns without having watched The Boy in the Iceberg. So for me, this is kind of an unofficial two-parter. But honestly, for the show to begin the way it did, this is the pilot episode and the second episode of the series. And for them to just hit it right off the bat the way they did, us being introduced to this world, being introduced to Aang, Katara, Sokka, Zuko, Iroh, being introduced into this world of a dystopian, post-war, post-100-year war, kind of post 100-year war civilization. How the Southern Water Tribe has been struggling because of all the Fire Nation raids. How Aang is so ready to put his life at risk so that these people who he literally just met a few hours ago are not put in danger. And even the escape from Zuko's ship it's great. It immediately introduces you to all these characters in such a fantastic way. And it makes sense right off these 2 episodes, right off the back of these 2 episodes, why the show has such longevity, why the show is still so relevant all these years later, literally 2 decades later, and why it's getting a live action TV series now after all this time. It all started with these 2 episodes, and it was just fantastic. And at number 1, we have The Library, Season 2, Episode 10. This may seem like such a weird pick to have as number 1. But if I'm being honest, this is my favorite episode of the series. It's weird because I'm pretty sure this is the first episode of the series I ever saw. Here's a bit of a backstory as to how I was even introduced into the into Avatar. After school care. After school care is what introduced me to the series. So this would have been when I was like in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that. And my counselor, my babysitter for after school care, he would put on Avatar to like entertain us. And the library is the first one that I remember watching. I'm pretty sure he showed us I'm pretty sure he started with the first episode, if I'm being honest, but the library is the one that really stuck it for me. That I always remembered. I always remembered them going into the library, them meeting with Wang Zhu. I believe that's the name of the spirit. Wang Zhu Ta, or whatever his name is. The giant owl spirit. Them researching when the eclipse is going to be. Them trying to escape the library after the owl spirit realizes what they're doing. You know, even a small bits of comedy between Sokka and the owl spirit, you know, with him saying, "Hey, here's a knot. Is this enough?" You know, and all that stuff with the other researcher from Ba Sing Se, you know, not wanting to go. Like, there's so many moments from this episode that always stuck with me. That's honestly why I have to put it as number 1. Because here's the thing. Yes, I was introduced to this series when I was like in essentially middle school. I didn't really watch the full series until maybe I was in high school, so a few years afterwards. And yes, technically speaking, I did watch the full series like in after school care. But if I'm being honest, I didn't remember jack shit of it aside from this episode. And here's the thing too with this episode. This episode is literally the turning point of the whole show. It's quite literally like in the dead set middle of the entire franchise, entire series. Literally episode like 30, 31, somewhere around there. For this whole time, the gang has been trying to figure out how to get one over the Fire Lord, how to get one over the Fire Nation. This is the episode where they figure out, oh, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to get that over the Fire Lord, to get that over the Fire Nation. This is when they find out about the eclipse that eventually leads to the Day of Black Sun. You know, that eventually leads to everything else that happens in this back half of the series. For me, that's why it's my favorite episode. It's just the episode that stuck with me the longest. It's the one that I've always remembered. It's the one that has the most moments that I remember. It's, in my opinion, it's just my favorite episode of the entire series. Simple as that. And last but not least, I just kind of wanted to give some quick honorable mentions. First off, we have The King of Omashu, Season 1, Episode 5, the introduction of King Bumi. Next up, we have Return to Omashu, Season 2, Episode 3. Again, King Bumi. I really like King Bumi as a character. He's very fun. And the 2 episodes that kind of focus on him are just fun. I really wanted to put them on the list, but like there's just no room. Next up, I have Bitter Works, Season 2, Episode 9. Another one that I really wanted to put in the list, but it's one of those that I just kind of don't really think about that often, if I'm being completely honest. Appo's Last Days, Season 2, Episode 16. This one really hurt not to put on the list, if I'm being honest. It's one of those episodes I just really don't go back to that often. Next up, we have The Headband, Season 3, Episode 2. Just a personal favorite of mine. I know it's one that not many people really think about, but it's a very personal favorite one of mine. Very random, if I'm being honest, but hey, again, my personal list. And last but not least, we have The Firebending Masters, Season 3, Episode 13. Basically, Zuko and Aang try to learn what firebending is all over again. A personal favorite of mine. I do think, generally speaking, a lot of people do like this one, but you know, I just couldn't really fit it on the list, if I'm being completely honest, and that's why it's an honorable mention. So yeah, that's basically it for now. That's the whole list. There you go. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Comment all that down below. Let me know. Let me know what's your favorite episode of Avatar, and what are you most excited to see in this new live action Avatar series that Netflix has. Comment all that down below. Let me know. And that's basically it for now. This is Daniel Mart signing off.